Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I've mentioned in the past before that I'm a bit of like a Monster High doll collector, but not really in a traditional sense. I like collecting them for my stock box because I feel like I see every Monster High doll as just like a really cool canvas that I can transform into a new doll or paint a new character. I get particularly excited when I acquire a rare doll for my stock box. And this doll is pretty rare and she's also extremely strange. So let's talk about her. Have you guys ever heard about the 14-inch Monster High doll? I feel like a lot of people probably have and a lot of people probably haven't. She's slightly taller than the normal Monster High dolls and slightly shorter than the frightfully tall Monster High dolls. And she is part doll, part play set, which was a choice on Mattel's part. Just strange in my opinion. She was one of Monster High's last releases before they took their hiatus, and she is Treesa Thornwillow, and nobody customizes this doll. There's pretty obvious reasons if you have one in your hands why nobody customizes her. She's also just not the most readily available. I mean, you can find her on eBay if you're in America, and she'll run you maybe like 30 to 50 bucks. But we're gonna get into her gimmicky qualities in a little bit. I want to get into what I'm going to be doing with her. So Treesa Thornwillow is a Dryad. If y'all don't know what a Dryad is, it is a nature spirit or nymph that lives in a tree and takes the form of a beautiful woman. Treesa seemed like the perfect candidate for a spring goddess, and I know it's a little bit late for a spring goddess. It's all repaint, but I got held up by my mermaid video, unfortunately, so whoopsie daisies. I wanted to make this inspired by, and I've talked about this artist before on my channel, but Alphonse Mucha is my favorite artist. I actually already have a Alphonse Mucha doll repaint where I tried to recreate one of his women into a doll, and somebody commented on that and said it's Alphonse Mucha. I'm not really sure which one of these is accurate because Google is telling me it's Mucha, and then YouTube is telling me it's Mucha. And whatever his name is, he has a beautiful painting called Four Seasons or Seasons. It seems to have multiple names, at least when I look it up online. But it's a beautiful painting and I was particularly inspired by it. What I find gimmicky about Treesa is that she has a thing on her back that you wind up and down and it makes her taller and shorter. Which would be a little cool if her proportions didn't get really out of whack when she gets taller. It just makes her look very strange. She also has wings on her back that look like vines, and they're covered up by a birdhouse, which I don't know. It's just a lot, and I'm not crazy about it, so we're gonna be cutting it off. Before I get into all that though, I need to do the basics of prepping her, which is just cutting off all her hair and then putting her head into hot water to soften up the vinyl so that I can pop her head off. Her head was super hard, so I had to leave it in for a little bit longer. And when I went to scrape around the inside of her head with a screwdriver, I couldn't pull the plugs out through her neck hole because it was just too stiff. So I cut a hole in the back of her head with an X-Acto blade and pulled them out that way. I wiped all the paint off her face with 100% acetone. Her sculpt is really pretty. I just really like her little lips. And her head is quite a bit bigger than a normal Monster High doll, which is exciting because it gives me more eyeball space. Alright, we gotta get down to business with his body. I am just cutting all this nonsense off her back. I also cut the things off of her arms as well. They're not as bad as the stuff on her back, but I just wanted to go for something a little bit different. And I'm using my Dremel tool to cut everything off. I sort of hate cutting through plastic with my Dremel tool. It just gets really messy. So for certain things, I was grabbing my wire cutter and using that to cut things off. After you cut everything off, this is what you get, and I actually really like this torso proportion. It's slightly thicker, or actually I think maybe quite a bit thicker than the normal Monster High dolls, and I just think it looks just so much nicer. I just really don't like the Monster High body design, the original one. Her arms are looking really rough, so I'm taking some sandpaper and just sanding it down. To fill in the unfortunate gaping hole that she has in her back, I'm taking epoxy sculpt, and I know that she has that cut across her torso. I decided not to fill that in with epoxy sculpt. It didn't really bother me too much, so I just kept it. Maybe it's in her backstory. Maybe when she was like a tree spirit, somebody tried to cut her down or something. I don't know. We're keeping it. I smoothed out her back a little bit, but it doesn't need to be perfect because she is wood and wood is not completely smooth. I then created the wood line texture that she has with a needle. I did the same exact thing to her arms that I did to her back. This is how the sculpting turned out. It looks okay. It's not perfect, but it doesn't really need to be, I swear. I'm painting over top of it with some brown acrylics. Off camera, I also sanded off her panties, because I do it with literally every doll. And when dolls are tanner, they look like very kind of ashy looking when you sand them. So I'm going over those areas with matte varnish. It just takes away the gray quality, and I went over top of the areas that I painted with varnish as well. For her hair, I was going to go for something completely different, but it just looked awful with her complexion. So I decided to go for my trusty brown yarn. I just love this stuff. I've used it in quite a few customs before. It brushes out into this beautiful like wavy quality. And I created wefts with that and just glued them to the head with Elmer's glue wall. I'm really happy with how her hair turned out, and I just feel like the more natural color was actually a really good choice, considering she's supposed to be a spring goddess, which is kind of like a nature goddess, and just looks more natural, you know? Onto the face up, I sprayed the doll 3 times with Mr. Super Clear, waiting 15 minutes between each spray and wearing a respirator mask, and then I got to painting. I always start with the eyes because I like to get them really figured out first because I think they're the most important part of a face. I wanted her eyes to be really big, not really big, like not like unusually big, but just big for a person. For her lips, I mixed together some brown and red pastels. I feel like this color, like a brownie red, just looks so pretty on tanner complexion, so that's why I went with it. For the cheeks, I used a reddish kind of pinky pastel, and I just put that all over the cheeks, the nose, and the forehead. I don't think I've ever given a doll brown eyes, which is just really crappy. I've done yellow, which is probably the closest I've gotten, but I've never actually done brown. And you know what? Brown eyes need love too, so we're gonna be giving her some brown eyes. I went from like a darker brown to a lighter brown ombre. I shaded around her eyes and just generally around her face with tones of brown pastel. To make her cheeks a little bit more blotchy and natural, I'm using this liner brush that is just completely destroyed and spiky, but because it's destroyed, it's a makeup liner brush by the way, it gives it sort of areas that are like, there's more pastel in certain areas, and it just creates a more skin-like quality. By the way, I've mentioned this in videos before, but not recently. That thing that keeps coming in, the white thing on the bottom right of the shot, is actually a magnifying glass. I wear them whenever I do face-ups. It just makes it easier for me to get all the little details. Veins, I love veins. Okay, so I am giving her branch-like pencil marks around her eyes and her forehead. This is just to create the look of veins, and I'm using a very sharp pencil. A tip that I have for veins is if you look at my hand, it's not all the way towards the tip of the pencil. This is because if I put it towards the tip, I'm going to apply more pressure, and I don't really want to apply a ton of pressure for this because that's how you get like weird lines for veins around the face, which I think is a common problem that people have where it just looks a little too intense. If you hold the pencil farther down, it gives you less pressure, which means softer lines. A while back when I was painting a tanner doll, I was mentioning how I like to put blue tones on dolls, no matter what the complexion color, and someone commented that darker complexions would probably have a green undertone, or certain ones would, and I think that makes sense because if it's like a more olive undertone, it probably would have a green undertone. So I wanted to try that with this doll because I think she has a bit of an olive undertone going on, and I think it looks really nice. Some people might not like it, but I think it looks really nice and kind of natural on the skin tone. To help with the blend in her eye and also to intensify the color, I went in with some brown pastels. She has some beautiful wood texture molding on her ears and also her body, and I thought about emphasizing that with some brown acrylics and just dry brushing them on, but I decided not to because I've seen a couple of customs that did that and I just wasn't crazy about the outcome. So I blushed the ears and the body how I normally would. I mentioned in my last two anime repaints that I really like a fuzzy ring around the eye, and I haven't done that with my more typical style of repaint because, to be honest, it's just a little bit hard to do on that scale. But since this doll has a lot of eye space, I wanted to do it to this doll, so I'm just flicking some black lines towards the pupil. For the brows, I went in with some brown pastel and decided that I just didn't like the placement of her eyebrows, so I'm bringing them a little bit lower down. Of course, since I'm going for the more natural thing, they're going to be luscious and thick. I highlighted around the eye with white watercolor pencil, and I'm just going over certain areas that I highlighted with white watercolor. She needs some brow hair, so I'm flicking some lines of brown watercolor pencil onto her brows. To emphasize the rings around her eye a little bit more, I went over the pencil with black watercolor. I like the swirly action that was going on her forehead, so I wanted to create some swirly action of my own. So I took a gold watercolor and I'm just adding some kind of like little swirls and waves coming out from her eye. I gave her the look of lip lines by adding some flicks of light pink onto her bottom lip. Mostly her bottom lip, maybe just a couple on the top. For eye highlights, I tried to give her yellow ones, just some flicks of yellow, but I decided it was just like a little bit too intense on top of the brown, so I ended up wiping that off. I then went in with metallic gold and did the same exact thing, but I decided that was too subtle, so I ended up eventually wiping that off as well. I've mentioned this in the past, but I'm going to mention it again. I use the Faber-Castell black pencil for lashes. I find that the Faber-Castell is the best for lashes and just generally any line that you have to create, because the pencil, or I guess it's not the lead, the watercolor part of it is really hard, so it gives you a very fine, thin, sharp line. There are other pencils that I think are more pigmented. For example, Derwent, in my opinion, is more pigmented. But the Faber-Castell is the best for just the smallest, sharpest of lines, whether that be eyelid lines or lash lines or brow hairs or whatever. I go over all the hairs on the face with some black watercolor. Attempt number 3 at these highlight lines in the eyes. I took out my neon watercolor palette and I took the orange shade from it, and I'm adding lines of that around the eye, and I actually like how this turned out. If you guys watched the haul that I bought the 2 neon watercolor palettes in, the more expensive one and then the cheaper one, this is actually from the cheaper one, and I think that one works great, by the way. If you guys want a neon watercolor palette, I'll link it down in the description. I went over certain orange lines with some metallic gold watercolor. I've been playing around with my catchlight shape lately. I actually did this doll before I did my mermaid doll, and this doll and that doll have similar catchlights, and I really like it. It's just good to experiment with things when it comes to doll repaints. I gave her a little dot of metallic copper paint on her pupil. I love when the waterline looks kind of wet or like teary-eyed. It's just the details for me. So I'm adding dots of white and metallic rose gold to the waterline. The baby hair wood grain thing that she has going on her forehead just looked a little bit weird not colored in, so I'm painting over those areas with some metallic copper paint. Time for the gloss. So I'm taking my Vallejo gloss and I'm putting some of that on her lippies. So I think that this is one of my favorite face-ups that I've done. I just love the eyes a lot. I think they look really pretty, and Yeah, it's just really fun to paint her. I lost the footage of me blushing her body, but I just used the same tones that I used in her face on her body. And a while back, when I was actually in Kuwait, I bought these Daiso stickers. They're nail stickers, and I just haven't used them for anything. So we're using them today. I'm putting one on the middle of her forehead. This was a bit hard to place, but I got it eventually. And then I took my Elmer's glue all and I put a little dot in the middle and put a gem on it. On to clothes. So this dress I'm going to be making her is made out of old dresses of mine that just don't fit as well anymore, and they're also really old, but I think I got chubbier, so I think that's why I put them in my fabric drawer. Anyway, I cut the shape out, and I also cut the shape out of this piece of fabric, so this I'm going to be sewing on top of the other piece of fabric. It's the same pattern for both, so they should fit pretty well, and I'm just sewing them at the top together. I sewed all the pieces together up the side seam. I gather stitched a strip of fabric and then I sewed that to the bottom of the dress. I then sewed everything together up the back seam. A lot of the Alphonse Muka ladies have like this strip of fabric that I don't really know what to call it down the middle of their dress, and it's like decorative, so that's what we're going to be doing. So I cut it out and then I hemmed it. I sketched out the design that I wanted, and I have tons and tons of caviar beads. I wanted to use these to create the design, so I'm putting down tacky glue and then I'm putting down whatever size caviar bead that I want. And I'm alternating between gold and then rose gold. This is how it came out, and I just think it looks pretty good, so I'm sewing that to the top of the dress. I found this really pretty gold ribbon in just my complete mess of a craft decorative drawer. Just all the things that I buy at the craft store that I think are pretty go in this drawer. And I am taking some fabric glue and I'm gluing that to the top of the dress. This is how the dress came out, but it's not quite done yet. So I wanted to add some like pearls and chains on her shoulder. They just like lay decoratively on her shoulder. So I did that off camera because it was just like, it was a lot of fiddling. And then I have these paper flowers that I painted the tops of them with metallic watercolors, and I hot glued those at the bottom of her dress, as well as flat back pearls. I did some little braids on the side of her face. With my super thin jewelry wire, I wrapped that around the branches near her face. Wire honestly just makes everything look better, so I wrapped some around her feet as well. I feel like every single custom that I do has gold in it, and I'm starting to think it might be my favorite color. Not because like it's particularly my favorite color, because I think pink would be, but because it's literally in everything that I do. She doesn't have nearly enough flowers on her, so I took all my flower bits and bobs out, and I'm going to be hot gluing some of those around her face. I do really quick, fast sketches for my dolls when I design them. Honestly, I wish I could do really detailed ones like Delightful or like some people do, but I just don't have the patience. And I like kind of fiddling around with things and sort of going into things with a vague idea, but not completely mapped out so that I have a little bit of freedom. But she had these in the sketch, like these just sort of chain decorative jewelry things on her arm, so I wanted to recreate those with the original ribbon that I used on her dress, and I sewed a chain onto it and then used some fabric glue to glue it around her arm. I really love how these little jewelry things, jewelry is a word that I'm not great at saying, but I like how this turned out. And this is my spring goddess Dryad. I hope you guys like her. I really do. I really love how her face up turned out, and just, I don't know, I feel like this is just very much my aesthetic, is this. And just kind of Alphonse Mucha, love his art and all that, so it was nice to be inspired by him. But I took some photos of her with my lamb doll, actually, because I think they look really adorable together. They just kind of match or look like they live in the same world or something. But yeah, I'm so happy that I painted this doll finally. She really has been on my desk for months just staring at me, and I just kept putting her there, so if I ever got a free moment I would paint her, and I finally did, and it feels great. Okay, so yeah, if you guys like her too, let me know down below. Also, like this video if you like this video. If you guys have a Treesa Thornwillow, maybe she's not as rare as I think. I think she is rare, but you can get her. She's like obtainable, okay, on eBay. But yeah, like this video if you like this video, subscribe, it makes me happy, and I hope you guys are having a beautiful day. Bye!
We'll be right back.